All right, well, welcome everybody. This is the Office of Public School Construction State Allocation Board stakeholder meeting for getting stakeholder feedback on the facility inspection tool. I am Michael Watanabe. I'm Chief of Program Services for OPSC. With us also on behalf of OPSC is Lisa Silverman. She's our Executive Officer. Barbara Kampminer, our Deputy Executive Officer. And Brian Lepask, our Operations and Policy Manager for OPSC for Program Services. So the four of us are here to answer your questions, take your feedback. As a reminder, Senate Bill 129, part of the Budget Act of 2021, requires OPSC to update the facility inspection tool and take into consideration stakeholder feedback and consider standards for school facilities, not only limited to stakeholders, but also the Association of Physical Plant Administrators operational guidelines, public health guidelines, and standards. And we're required to update this tool by June 30th of 2022 so that everyone can use it beginning July 1st of 2022. So before we get started, a little meeting logistics here. We're going to walk you through the agenda item. It was posted last week on our website. For those who haven't had an opportunity to read through it, we'll give you a little background on the facility inspection tool, kind of walk through how we got to here, how we got here today, how the current tool works. OPSC will walk through some of the changes we have so far, and then we'll also talk about some early stakeholder feedback. At any time, if you would like to ask questions, use the raise hand feature in the participant box. We do have the chat turned off. Brian will be monitoring it, and we'll allow you to unmute when you raise your hand to kind of control the meeting. But feel free to stop me at any time if we need to go back or you want to ask questions or provide feedback as we go through that. If you are watching the live webcast, you'll be unable to provide feedback and comments to us. If you would like to do so, below that live webcast link on our website is the Zoom meeting link. You can rejoin through that link so you can participate that way in the meeting as well. Again, as you raise your hand, we'll call on you. We'll hit the unmute button so that you can unmute yourself. You will need to accept that before your mic will allow you to unmute, and then feel free to ask your questions away. We are seeking all feedback, positive, negative. What do you like about the existing tool? What don't you like? Some of the proposed changes, both ways too. What do you like? What don't you like about the proposed changes? And then we're here to solicit all the feedback that you have to offer on anything related to the facility inspection tool. For your convenience, we did include in our attachment A on the item on page 10 with all the authority related to the facility inspection tool. There are limitations to the considerations we can take and what's allowed in statute, so we can't go too far, but if it's allowable in statute, it's something we can consider. So with that, are there any questions? Let's see, Joanne.
Is this how we raise our hand? Because I see no button that I usually would have to say raise my hand.
Let's see, should be under your reactions button on the Zoom control panel.
Thank you.
No problem. If your video's on though, we'll keep an eye out for you too as well. All right, I'm gonna share a screen and then we'll get started. All right, just a minute to get set up. Too big. Bear with me, too many windows open at once. All right. So a little background before we get started. The facility inspection tool has gone back quite a ways. We all the way back to 2004 when Senate Bill 550 established a good repair standard for facilities. It was part of a settlement agreement in Williams versus California back in 2004, which kind of enshrined the right to students to have clean, safe, and functional school facilities. Good repair was defined in statute back then as being clean, safe, and functional. And that was determined by what we did at the time called the Interim Evaluation Instrument, or the IEI. That was used for a couple years as we started the process of defining and evaluating school facilities. Back then, the statute required the county superintendent to inspect their schools annually for those ranked in deciles 1 through 3 based on the 2003 API. Legislation over time updated that every 3 years with 2006, 2009, and subsequent triennial updates to report on the condition of facilities. The condition of facilities also required to be reported as part of your school accountability report card. So the intent of this instrument is to help facilitate that reporting for school districts locally. Subsequent to that, we held stakeholder meetings in 2005 after the IAI was used for a couple of years and got feedback from the field and people who use the IEI and what they thought about it. And it was a fairly comprehensive report that was published back in 2005 and sent over to the legislature. And with that, they took that forward and was followed by Assembly Bill 607 in 2006. For the large part, the definition of good repair stayed the same. It was still referring to good repair as maintained in a manner that ensures clean, safe, and functional. So that definition has not changed. But what it did require is OPSC to establish a permanent instrument. And as part of that permanent instrument, statute spelled out main criteria that should be evaluated in these facilities. So we worked on that, and in June 2007, the State Allocation Board adopted the facility inspection tool, which was used for a couple years. And then in 2009, we did some updates. We refactored the calculations a little bit, put a little more weighting in there. We made it so that if a facility had extreme deficiency, you didn't qualify for good or fair. It automatically lowered your scores. So there was a heavier criteria and emphasis placed on extreme deficiencies. What it also did is weighted other categories more than others by grouping them into sections, which I'll go through with you as well. So the facility inspection tool is a visual inspection tool. It's meant to, as a result of stakeholder feedback, be used by inspectors in the field where they can just walk around campus. The expectation was not that you climb on ladders to look on roofs, dig into trenching, look at plumbing. You could turn on a faucet and see if it worked. It didn't require a lot of training or skill. Anyone should have been able to use it. So that's how it was designed. So we did form a work group of experts, and we wanted to create a usable functional evaluation tool, a tool that was easy to use, but would still allow flexibility, allowed for comments, allowed for feedback. So there's blanks on the form for when deficiencies are identified, what exactly is found and what was the cause of that or what's going on there. Provide some perspective for anyone that's reading it. So looking at the current view of the facility inspection tool is on page 3 of our item. So we'll kind of walk through that. You can see in this top row, we have 8 scoring sections: systems, interior, cleanliness, electrical, restrooms and fountains, safety, structural, and external. And they are grouped with a weighting system in mind. So some are grouped, the smaller the grouping, the more weighting emphasis that was placed on it. So interior surfaces having only one category, that carries 1/8 the weight by itself. Systems has 3 characteristics tied to it: gas leaks, mechanical, HVAC, and sewer. When the scores roll out, each of those scores essentially is weighted 1/3 towards the total system scores. And that becomes important as the final ranking rolls out. So that's how the weighting works in those kind of system in this particular version. Below those 8 systems, you can see the 15 categories. And these categories are based on the minimum that needs to be reviewed in statute. So we have gas leaks, mechanical, HVAC, sewer, interior services, overall cleanliness, pest vermin infestation, electrical, restrooms, sink fountains, fire safety, hazardous materials, structural damage, roofs, playgrounds, schools, doors, and fences. The statute, in addition to identifying those 15 categories, does give some criteria, and that's on page 10 of the authority, of what specifically a user is looking for in those. We kind of give a little bit of background in the item of what each of those ideas are, and that kind of rolls out your score. So what a user is supposed to do is they walk through the campus and they grade each of these areas on if it's okay, is there a deficiency or an extreme deficiency, and they'll evaluate each system for each classroom or building, depending on how the school district has chosen to break down their categories for their school. The instructions for the fit will describe how to determine is it okay or deficiency and extreme deficiency. The instructions also go into very specific items that if it has this occurring, it's automatic extreme deficiency. So you'll see that in instructions as we go through this. So what I thought we'd do is kind of show you what it looks like when it's filled out. This would be a form that's completed. It's classroom based and also has some other facilities in there like multi-purpose room, kitchen, staff lounges. If you're using our online PDF, these are drop-down menus to choose between okay, deficiency. If it's not applicable, it means it doesn't exist in that building. It doesn't mean there wasn't an issue found. It means the system doesn't exist. So in the case of classroom 1, there is no bathroom, so it's not graded. And that way it's not a factor in your score. Once you complete this entire form per campus, the totals are ranked up and added up onto the category totals and ranking sheet. Let me make that a little bigger for you. There's a lot of math involved on here, but they try to keep it simple when we created the weighting system. So in this first example for gas leaks, across all the buildings listed, there were 6 OKs for gas leaks. What that does is out of the total possible in this column, 6 out of 6, they get 100%. So your good repair for each system is a percentage based on the number of OKs in the category. So mechanical HVAC you see in this category, they had 4 OKs, but 2 deficiencies. 4 out of 6 is 66%. And we go across the horizontal. One of the things you'll note on this particular example, under roofs, it was marked an extreme deficiency for their roof. Any extreme deficiency automatically triggers a 0% rating for that particular facility. Right. What happens next with these scores is the scores across this horizontal, this 80 or 7%, 100, 100, we add all those together and we divide by 8. And that's how we get to this 84% score. And then that 84%, based on the 4 categories, exemplary, good, and fair and poor, rolls out a fair rating for the entire facility. So there's 2 sets of ratings. One is fair, good, and poor for the individual systems, and then one for the building or the whole facility as a whole. There's 2 sets. Not a lot of flexibility. Statute does require those 2 different grading systems. So these 3 categories, good, fair, poor for the systems, and good, fair, poor, and exemplary for the facility as a whole. All right. So that's how the fit currently works. Going on to, I'll pause there if there's any questions on that. All right, we'll go on to, on page 6 of the item, I'll start to walk you through what some of OPSC's proposed changes. So right now, currently, based on the APPA operational guidelines, we pulled 2 books. One is based on maintenance and the other is based on custodial. And one of the things we note in both the guidelines is that clean is highly subjective. And it's difficult to define what is clean. But the basic premise behind both of these guidelines is that the frequency of cleaning correlates directly to a level of clean. And in these books, they do a 1 through 5 rating criteria for how clean a facility is. We didn't copy it exactly, but the current version of the FIT rates clean on these categories. Oops. So school, oh, I don't want to do that. I might not be able to have it. Schools, ground buildings, common areas, individual rooms appear to have been cleaned regularly. Regularly is not defined in this particular case. It also asks you to look at A, B, C, and D. Do they appear free of accumulated refuse, dirt, and grime, unabated graffiti, restrooms, drinking fountains, food preparations appear to be clean each day? What we're proposing on page 24 is to go in a little more detail to be a little more consistent with what APPA is doing, and going into a more prescriptive approach for what clean looks like. Appearance levels is what APPA uses for all the major items, just floors, restaurant fixtures, and horizontal surfaces. So we added surfaces to the one of the areas you're looking at in overall cleanliness, and we've broken down into B, C, and D to be more prescriptive in what means okay, what means deficient, and what means extreme deficiency. So in the case of okay, you should appear to be clean with minimal dirt, dust, or buildup. Floors and carpets appear to have been swept or cleaned within the last week. Light fixtures and all bulbs are working properly. Facilities areas are adequately stocked and odor free. In our minds, as we look at swept or cleaned in the last week, we think that's something you should be able to tell visually, a more obvious approach versus being able to tell if something got cleaned daily. And that kind of aligns with what APPA is doing. From a deficiency standpoint, we go with 2 weeks. You obviously see a little bit more stuff on the ground. You might be able to tell more. Obviously, it depends on the grade of the kids you're serving. But deficiency, we looks at being clean in the last 2 weeks, how your carpet looks, dull, matted, or stained. Corners of the room appear to be having recognizable amounts of dirt or grime buildup. Floors do not appear to have been swept or vacuumed in 2 weeks. Trash does not appear to be having taken out daily, something on the more obvious side. And then extreme deficiency would appear to be dirty, dingy, scuffed. Evidence of buildup and dust, dirt, stains, or trash. Floors have been swept or vacuumed have not been swept or vacuumed in over 2 weeks. The light fixtures are dirty. For this one, we also went more prescriptive approach. If more than 5% of your bulbs have been burnt out, we would call that an extreme deficiency. So we've got a little more prescriptive in this particular case. Another proposal OPSC is putting out there is on page 26, and that's adding a square footage column to the evaluation detail. It's reasonable in our minds to assume that the larger the facility, the greater the level of effort to clean something. So what this does is by adding square footage, it gives someone perspective. There could be classrooms that are 900 square foot, 1,200 square foot. You could have a multi-purpose room that may be 2,000 square feet. You could have a gym that's 15,000 square feet. So by adding square footage, this kind of gives the reader, the parents, the people that are reading your report, some perspective on how big the facility we're talking about here when they see a clean rating. Some other categories we're proposed adding is just total square footage of the site, which would just sum from the previous pages. The number of maintenance staff on site, site enrollment. Presumably, the more people that are on the site, the harder it will be to maintain the facilities in a clean manner for certain categories. And additionally, the number of maintenance staff on site assigned to the site there. The more maintenance staff, in theory, you can keep up better, right? So those are OPSC's proposed changes. Any questions so far? All right. Let's see. Mike Schroeder, let me unmute you. Go ahead, Mike.
Question I would come up with is why are light fixtures included in the cleanliness category and not electrical? Because a lot of schools, if they go over 9 feet, that would be a maintenance issue and not a custodial issue.
Oh, we could look at that one. I think in APPA, light fixtures were identified in that category, so we might have done that inconsistent with that.
I could understand the one down at the bottom where it says dust and dirt or whatever built up in the light fixtures, but the lamps burnt out is generally a maintenance thing, or can be. It's a combination, I should say.
We can double check that and come back at a future meeting of what our findings were on that one.
Okay, and then the other question I would ask is down on the other sheet when you said a maintenance staff assigned to a site, would that be better worded as custodians assigned to a specific site, because maintenance generally isn't assigned by site as much as they are to several different sites.
That's a good comment. And we actually had some early stakeholder feedback as we were working through this that one request, and I'll get to that one a little bit. They requested 2 categories, one for number of maintenance staff on site and one for number of custodial on site for both categories. Okay. Yeah, comment. Let's see, just going down the list, Debbie.
Hello?
There you go.
Oh, first, OPSC, what does that stand for?
Oh, my apologies. Office of Public School Construction.
Okay.
And we are an office under the Department of General Services.
So Office of Public?
School Construction, correct.
Okay. And then my next question is, so are you familiar with the California Association of School Business Officials?
Yes.
Okay. I know that's what we have been going by, but I guess they also are implementing the APPA handbook. My second question is when we're doing square footage, they're only doing length times width, and they're not including the height. And we have to climb a ladder, clean the light fixtures, we have to do cobwebs, and high windows and whatnot. So I don't know why they don't include length times width and height when you're doing measurements to get the square footage.
So possibly we may need to consider 2 categories on square footage and cubic footage both, then possibly.
Did you say they didn't include it because why?
Oh, well, we propose square footage from a ground space. In our existing school facility program, square footage is actually already defined. So we are proposing using the same definition for the purposes of this form, and that would be the enclosed area. So outside face of an exterior structural wall of the building, length, height, and height on a square building, but we can take any shapes and sizes, obviously. For interior portion of buildings, we usually go interior center line of the walls if we're measuring interior space. So if you have to break out hallways versus classroom space on a large building, we can do that too. And we go center wall to center wall when we do that. So we try to capture all of the building.
Are you going to be?
Go ahead.
I just didn't know if you had a formula already that you're going to present, or am I just sorry, I don't mean to be jumping the gun here, but
not for square footage. I mean, it would be standard building calculation square footage for the most part. We use CAD programs to measure precisely, but at the school district level, obviously that may not be possible if the plans aren't available. So the general guidelines here are, I think, an estimation though. It's to give perspective on the size of the building or the classroom that's being evaluated.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to jump in real quick, but that's why we're here today, is to get feedback from folks. So if other people have thoughts on that, we'd like to hear that as well. So this is just our, it's the first item, but if that's something that would be helpful or is important on the fit, then we definitely would like to hear how that would work for school districts and for all the other groups we have joined in this meeting today. So thank you for the comment. And if anyone else has thoughts on that, please feel free to jump in too.
We'll go on to Letty.
Hello. I have a couple questions. One has to do with that square footage calculation. So I know that you measure site square footage on the outside of buildings and building area square footage on the inside. It might be easier for purposes of this if in fact that total is the total interior building area. Because like just quickly you said, and this box would be you add up all of those. Well, it isn't. It's actually a different calculation that includes the widths of the walls. So you might consider just making it the total of the interior square footage areas. Just a thought. It will be simpler than having to do two different calc methodologies.
Gotcha.
But my other question, when you're marking an area and you've defined okay, deficiency, and extreme, it reads like you would have all of those problems for it to be an extreme deficiency. And I'm thinking that's not really where we're going, right?
Correct.
Is it a preponderance of them, or if any of those are present, or how do you see that definitions on page 7 being used?
Yeah, right now it's by categories. So under the gas category, if you have an odor, it's automatically a deficiency in that particular category. So that would hurt you right away. In other areas, may not. In mechanical systems, HVAC, for example, if it's just not working, it's automatically an X, an extreme deficiency. But if it's working, it just may not be cold enough. It may not be blowing hard enough. It may not be keeping up with whatever the environment is at. Then maybe that doesn't hit quite extreme deficiency. So in certain categories, and specifically the ones where these X's are marked already on the instructions,
okay.
yeah, those are automatically extreme deficiencies.
But if it really is, say, on the cleanliness, where it says it's dingy, dirty, scuffed, trash on the floors, hasn't been vacuumed, it would be a general. It's not quite as specific as the X, but if you had a whole bunch of problems in an area, you could give it a deficiency, even though individually all those things don't exist. Right?
Yeah, if I think I understand you're saying, we have one proposal for that, and that's OPSC's. And if it is,
I read the other. The other
Yeah.
is much more detailed, and maybe that's why the other's coming up. Okay, I get it. Thank you.
and we'll walk through those ones too, as well.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just a start if we wanted to keep it simple, but if we want to add attachments, we certainly can consider that as well. So we'll go over the cleanliness and the other some other proposals for that as well too shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I got Lance.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to comment on having the square footage calculation and the number of maintenance or custodial staff, and tying this into the APPA standards for cleanliness. APPA.
Oh, we lost you.
So if anybody goes back to check and see, well, how many custodians do you have on your site and how many square feet are they cleaning, you might be in APPA's level 5 of cleanliness, where you can't meet those cleanliness standards, and some districts might not be able to add the custodial staff sufficient. So it highlights a problem for some school districts where they can't add the number of custodial staff sufficient to meet that level of cleanliness.
So saying it's problematic, are you saying it shouldn't be included, or just kind of more pointing that out?
If we're looking at APPA standards for how to define cleanliness, they also have staffing ratios for each level of cleanliness, 1 through 5, 1 being the best, 5 being the worst. And there's generally square footage calculations. Say, 1 full-time employee for 20,000 square feet of building space is level 1. Whereas anything over 35,000 square feet per custodian would be level 5. And I know several school districts that either they've had economic setbacks and they've reduced their custodial staffing to the 40 to 50,000 square feet, and they've had to cope with cleaning methods. So they're cleaning rooms every other day, or they're doing things that wouldn't meet the APPA requirements for the appropriate cleanliness level. Having a document that shows the square footage of the building as well as the number of full-time custodians, somebody can make that calculation very quickly and assume you don't have the custodial staff. And I'd say it would call into question the credibility of the report.
Gotcha. Bill.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, can you go back to the page that has the you were just looking at with the square footage calcs that you have this stuff. I would just want to echo that. Yeah, that's the page. I think you should, if you're going to add this number of maintenance staff, I think more appropriately for most districts that I work with, it would be number of custodial staff on site. And if you're, unless it's a high school, in most of the districts I work at, high schools, have custodians that they may have plant managers or facility managers or full-time, they may have a full-time maintenance team. But for most elementary schools that I work with, it's only going to be custodial staff on site. So, and I guess that does get to the points that the previous speaker was making about, then you have some comparison to the square footage of the space. And then hopefully that ties back to the legislature, and the governor will provide more funding to allow for more appropriate staffing levels at these schools to ensure cleanliness. But not to state the obvious, but anyway, I do think the site square footage, obviously a district would have to go through an initial year of setting up every site square footage, which they have in their 1As that may or may not be in date, but whatever, it's a little bit of work. I think it's a good idea to have it, but it is going to be a little bit of work for the district's facilities team to get that stuff in there. And one of the other issues about doing these inspections is when are they occurring during times when students are on site or not, and being able to go into every classroom and doing that while students are there. So it's one of the issues, it's just a comment. And I notice you have the weather condition. You may want to have were students present, et cetera, because there's also going to be times when, for example, is the mechanical system operable? Well, the system may be turned off by the building energy management system at the time when the inspection is being made. And so then does the inspector have the ability to override the BMS controls and turn the system on, et cetera? So it's a couple of things just to throw out there for consideration.
Thanks, Bill. Kimberly.
Thank you. I wanted to comment first on Lance. I think the goal is to try to make sure that we have accurate reporting on staffing and square footage, because we know that our custodial staff in our schools have been struggling economically to delineate dollars to cleaning. And we're hoping that this reporting will prompt the legislature to allocate dollars. So what we're ideally hoping is that we can kind of shine a light on a problem that schools have been struggling, having to expand the worker workload to do more with less. So I would urge that be included, because I think it's necessary to shining a light on the needs of our schools, kind of similar to what Bill said, that like this would be helpful in the governor then, kind of prompting to pay dollars. And then the only other question I had, I don't see a problem with including a prompt that says where students present. Is that a question that's currently something considered for the inspection tool when you do a traditional inspection that we've been doing for the good repair? I'm a little new to this, so.
It's not a prompt. Inspectors are welcome to include that information in the comments section of the form, though. Anything they find or why they weren't able to rate something or were able to review something, they can put that in the comments too.
Got it. Okay.
But you're right. If we do draw a box specifically to that, a checkbox or something like that, it would make it more obvious to don't forget to include that kind of information. The statute governing this does point to the county superintendent of school. They are supposed to minimize disruption to the operation of the school when they do the visit. It doesn't specify when they have to go, just that they have to minimize disruption when they do it. All right, let's go to Lester.
Hi, good afternoon. It looks like evening, but good afternoon, everyone. Lester Garcia down in Los Angeles. I'm a parent of 3, and I work with SCIU Local 99, which represents custodial employees at LA Unified School District, as well as other surrounding school districts in LA and Ventura County. I just want to sort of reiterate the points that Kim made, as well as I think it was Bill that made it earlier. I think one of the challenges with these measures is always balancing the objective with the subjective. I think the visual, the visual condition of a campus, of a classroom is, to a certain degree, very, very subjective. And I feel like including the square footage along with, in comparison to the staffing ratios, a number of custodians on a campus can help balance out and help create a more comprehensive picture of where these campuses are by including some objective data, right? If you don't have the staff and the personnel to cover the amount of square footage, and I'm not sure if the square footage on here also includes the different types of surfaces, so carpet versus linoleum and different things like that. But when we look at square footage versus staffing, if you don't have the staff to cover the square footage, then I think as Mr. Bidnick pointed out, you're not going to be able to get to it, and that's something that needs to be said, and it's something that needs to be recorded. Because if we can't provide our students and our families with a clean, safe, and sanitary environment that's conducive to learning, then we're never going to get there, right? So it doesn't matter how we assess it or what we assess, we won't be able to get there. And so giving us a clear picture of where we need to be, I think, is critical. And so making sure that we continue to include that in this tool. And I thank folks for putting thought into this. This is definitely a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. We got A. Perez next.
Yeah, how you doing? Andy Perez with the Office of Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. Just question on this form that I'm looking at right now with the number of maintenance and the site enrollment and square footage. So because we're a county office, we have several portables on school sites that we can inspect that are just standalone portables. How would we in turn fill up this information with the site enrollment and the maintenance on staff or custodial on staff? Are we basing that information on the school district itself, on the site that the portable is located at, or are we going, or should we include just the information based on the classroom that is on that site? For the sites that we own, that we fully own, that wouldn't be a problem filling in this information, but it's more the portable classrooms that are on school districts.
I don't know on that one. I think that might be determined at the local level. That might be a good thing for comments too, that if Fresno COE has a site on a Fresno Unified campus, they could add to their comments that, Fresno COE does not have any maintenance staff assigned a site, but per their agreement, it's handled by Fresno Unified, or, that might be a comment type question that you want to add on there. I think that's more of a local control thing. We don't prescribe that on the form though, currently, but we can look at that. You want to follow up, Andy? Oh, I need to unmute you again. Try that.
There we go. Okay. So the problem I think would be is when we in turn, because we take account of all our standalone portables and we combine them into one to create for the SARC. So in that instance, again, not sure how that maintenance and the enrollment is going to get affected if I combine 30 standalone portables together into one report. it's kind of a local issue, but also, it's information that's being recorded to put onto the SART.
Yeah, we could take a look at that. My inkling is that it's a local decision. The form isn't mandatory to use in our format. I would think Fresno COE would want to comment on that just for clarification, for perspective, for anyone that views it, that's what they're doing, and that a group of portables is being reported onto one SARC. I think that's kind of important. Yeah, I don't know if there's other COEs on this meeting and what they do, perhaps. I see. I'm gonna skip. Gemma, I know you're a San Diego COA, I believe, right? San Diego or LA?
Hi, Michael, and hi, everybody. I'm Gemma Estrella, and I'm with the LA County Office of Education. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide some thoughts and some feedback. So maybe I'll start with the item that Andy was just asking about, and that we handled over the years in a particular way. So normally in the past, when we had facilities, specifically COE programs within a larger campus, typically what we would do is to complete the school facilities inspection tool, and then separately complete a document, a separate fit specifically for the county office program. And that allow for both to be documented with the appropriate enrollment, with the appropriate support, because in many cases, it had been, maybe inconsistent is not the right term, but it's been handled differently from one district to another, where maybe some things are done differently, either by the county office or by the district. So I think your comment, Michael, in terms of it's a local decision, that would be perfectly appropriate in this case. And in LA, we handle it by creating two separate reports. And are you okay, Michael, if I go into a couple of the items that I wanted to make comments about?
Yeah, go ahead while you're on.
All right, that sounds good. So one of the items that came up earlier on had to do with when the visits are done. And in LA County, we do 526 visits each year. That was the quantity that we did this past year and what we've done over the past 15 years. I've been involved with the program for every single year, and my understanding of the legislation is that the visits must be done when students are in class. And because of that, in the past, the facilities inspection tool did not necessarily have that question on whether or not the students were present. In the past 2 years, because of the pandemic, we were given that leeway through CDE to be able to visit and not necessarily make unannounced visits. And then secondly, the students, for the most part, were working remotely, so students were not necessarily on campus. But that is as of the last year and a half since the pandemic. In the past, the visits were generally done during school hours. And for LA County, because of the quantity of schools that we've had to do, we did not necessarily perform the visit together with the instructional materials or together with the teacher assignment team. It was very, very much a facilities visit separate from everything else. The other item that I wanted to mention about is in terms of maintenance, the number of maintenance staff. You know, I agree with earlier speakers in terms of maintenance personnel. I don't think that I've ever seen maintenance people assigned to elementary or middle schools. High schools, absolutely agree that sometimes there would be a plan manager or a facilities person assigned, but it's not consistent based on the 43 districts that we visit every year. Custodial, however, is definitely the area where I understand SEIU's effort and perspective, because that is definitely the area that if only one person is available and the school is a large school, then it definitely has an impact on the level and the quality of service. So the staffing ratio, I absolutely agree, and I absolutely support that it would give visibility to issues that all of us in this room who have been practitioners, we know that there are challenges out there. And the question that I think is, it makes all of us a bit nervous, is the visibility would be there, and then who's responsible for providing it? You know, is that going to be a responsibility and additional pressure on the districts and the representatives of the custodial teams? Or is it really the state that will help us out with that? It is a gap. It is an issue. And I think the visibility could give us a really good results, especially if we as practitioners advocate for it together in the same path. Meaning to be able to receive and support those districts that do not have the appropriate support and the appropriate personnel. And then last but not least, I know that you're just at the, kind of in the middle of the presentation, Michael, but my understanding is that the effort is to get to an electronic document. And I'm just looking forward to either, help, support. We do have an electronic document that is actually in a database. We've had it for years, and I just want to make it, I'll make you aware of it in case that you wanted to see what it looks like, how it operates, and if the intent is to turn this into an electronic document, that you have at least one sample that you could view. And thank you for that.
Let's see, let's go on to Joanne.
Thank you. I've seen over the years as a retired facilities person that as we go from version to version to version, either in law or in forms, more is added and nothing is taken away. And they get heavier and heavier and heavier. And that's what I've seen with the FIT. So I would respectfully ask that now that you've moved, or if you're deciding to move to square footage, that you look at the fact that site enrollment is not material, number of classrooms is not material. What is material then is square footage. So be careful how you ask it, make it easy to do, because districts do not all participate in the state facilities program. They do not all have their square footage, as I will very much support that fact, and that mid-wall to mid-wall is just crazy because I can't walk that off. So total site square footage, for instance, do you mean total building square footage? If so, say that. So site enrollment has no bearing because you have to maintain all that you own on that site, no matter how many kids you have there. Just because you have 30 less kids this year and we're going into declining enrollment, please don't kill our custodial staff needs by the fact that the site is not fully enrolled. It just doesn't have bearing if you're going to go to a square footage basis. And I concur that the word maintenance is misstated here and it's custodial. But thank you for your time.
Joanne. All right. Lance.
All right, thanks again. I just wanted to kind of echo some of that sentiment. I think having realize custodial and maintenance are two separate funding sources. So most of the schools, if they participated in the state program, they have a 3% routine restricted maintenance requirement that's built into the budget. Custodial typically comes from unrestricted general fund, and with the LCFF funded districts, the custodial cleanliness and staffing will be part of their LCAP. So that's decided at the local level. Trying to place any kind of a mandate or restriction on how the schools are going to divvy out their own budgets to address custodial issues. One that might be a little bit challenging or taxing. And then the other is tying the, again, with the staffing ratios, it might be counterproductive to say your school is clean, but you have half the custodial staff that you should have based on an easy standard calculation for staffing ratios. And that would give other stakeholders in the LCAP the leverage to say, look, our cleanliness is exemplary in all these categories as represented on this fit inspection. Therefore, we don't need the custodial staff. I just think it might have the a counter to the desired effect. So I would kind of caution placing the number of custodial staff in square footage.
And Debbie, one more.
Yes, I had a question on, because we're in COVID times right now. Hold on one second. So how is it gonna play into that aspect of our cleaning standards now? Because everything is due to COVID on the square footage.
I don't think I understand the question. Can you?
So, because we have new guidelines due to COVID, how is that going to play into the factor of square footage?
I don't know that it does. From a square footage standpoint, our recommendation was to include it just to give the reader, the parent, the person walking the campus that sees these hanging on the wall, some kind of perspective. If they see a good, fair, poor rating, well, why is that particular classroom a good, fair, poor versus the other classroom? And square footage might help with that perspective. That was I would say the extent of our reasoning for including it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Lester.
Hi, just a quick question going back to the question of enrollment. When schools put down here sort of the enrollment, are they looking at before and after school programs as well, or is it just a sort of regular, quote unquote, regular instructional day?
We didn't specify, but I think we should.
Yeah.
If we keep it, we would probably want that clarification.
Yeah, and I would venture to say that you would want to include all of it because it's the amount of use that's getting. And maybe there's some sort of balance there between the square footage. Definitely want to make sure that there's a floor set tied to the square footage, but that there's also room for, or at least additional, that we have safety nets in place in case you have the sort of population compounding on in any particular facility. So maybe the floor is tied to the square footage, and there's something there around if the population goes up a certain amount, percentage, or something along those lines that balances those two.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. Let me walk through the attachments D, D1, D2, and E1, E2. These are some of the early stakeholder feedback we've received. And some of those might actually address some of the questions that we've had so far. Let me pull those up in 1 second. What you have here, so D1 is basically the stakeholder feedback provided as is, piggybacking off of OPSC's proposal. What we've done is highlight in yellow what they've added to what we've already proposed. So we'll kind of walk you through that. 1 second here. All right, so this first one, so they added additional areas to take a look at for cleanliness, high touch areas and exterior grounds as well in terms of cleanliness, taking a look at those extra areas. A few other things that were noted, updating the definition or the review for restrooms, are they cleaned daily is one of their suggestions. Can you tell that they've done that as a determining factor in cleanliness or in the restroom category specifically? They've also recommended square footage. and a few other categories, which these are kind of hard to see unless you pull it up, but in site, they wanted to include ground square footage. Presumably also you could include acreage as that relates to that. Total building square footage, adding average number of custodial staff on the site daily, and the number of restroom sites also on the daily. Kind of obviously the more you have, the more it takes to clean, right? Actually, I think G2 is where I did the highlights. The other thing they've also proposed is breaking out cleanliness in more detail. We took what was on D1 on their actually, let me show you that one really quick before I show you this one. So on D1, they propose these various categories to break up cleanliness into more detail. So you take on the original form, cleanliness is just one box for the building and no information whatsoever. It doesn't speak to floors versus counters versus windows. Dust, it's just one category. So what this essentially does is break up each classroom into a whole bunch of components before you get to the cleanliness category. What we've done with their D1 attachment is kind of mocked up what it could look like if we were to go that route, which is on D2 on page 40 of the item. And essentially you look at, we flop the order of the X and Y axis here, but basically if you're looking at say wing A, you look at the floors, vacuum, are they mopped? Yes. Are they free of spots? Yes. And you go down the entire category. And then you do that for each building. And then have a more prescriptive approach for giving the okay versus deficiency and extreme deficiency by basically summing up the number of no's in a category. So a low number of no's not clean would indicate an okay. If you get a high number of no's, then you start to move to the deficiency or extreme deficiency category. So that's one proposal out there to get more level of detail for the cleanliness category. In E1, similar. And on what we've done on E2 is also highlight some of the changes that have been added. A little more descriptions for each of the comments and ratings so that when you have a deficiency or an extreme deficiency, you have a comment box to explain it. Speaking to Lester's comments on the form, adding a column about the area characteristics. Is it a high traffic area? Does it run an after school program in addition to the kids that are there during the day? Is it used by the community? If you have a performing arts center, is it just used by the school or is it used by the community at night? Same with your fields, your football fields. Now, is it just used by the school or does the community use it as well? Because that certainly would have an impact on your ability to keep it clean. So they proposed another column to add comments like that for more perspective on the categories. This one also proposes to, this one again, has the custodial staff added on another on the form as well, in addition to the maintenance staff. So you get both. And we could certainly draw those into separate boxes so it's clear what that number is, custodial versus maintenance in that column. Another unique thing on this one is a grading system. So statute requires these buildings, these systems to be on a good, fair, and poor. What they've proposed is to provide letter grades for the individual systems. I don't think we can get there because I think statute prohibits that perspective, but the idea being that parents, kids, everyone's familiar with letter grades and systems coming up through school. So it makes it easier to understand from that perspective. They do propose the ability though, because also on a full building, full campus standpoint, you have to rate it fair, good, poor, or exemplary. So they create a mechanism to determine in their recommendation to A, B, C, D, and F, that would translate to a fair, exemplary, good, or poor score. So that's another one that we definitely want feedback on the thought process and the use of letter grades versus the good, fair, poor rating. It's an extra step in the calculation because you're converting it from a percentage to a letter grade and then back to a good, fair, poor versus just taking that percentage going straight to a good, fair, poor calculation. So it's an extra step from a calculation standpoint. But we want everybody's feedback on that part as well. And then you'll see as you flip to the item, I won't go through every one of them, but take a look at those. They added extra categories in each of the instructions. Workspaces, in addition to being clean, they also talk about sanitized. So we like feedback on those ones as well. So those are some of the changes. We welcome your feedback now, and if you want more time to digest all of this, you can send it after the meeting too as well. All right. So we'll start with Lance.
Thanks. I just want to comment, if you are dealing with the number of staff, differentiate full-time versus part-time employees.
Okay. Thank you.
Or full-time equivalents.
Right. Do that. Joanne.
I can clearly see that where some constituents are attempting to take the fit is a half-baked, my apologies in advance, approach to trying to make a custodial analysis tool. Now, we have another thing called an LCAP, and that tool is from a different department, not OPSC. And it also needs some enhancement as far as whether or not we are dividing our monies, our general fund monies, appropriately to manage our schools. And it is woefully lacking on any separation for custodial and maintenance monies. I would hesitate to take a lawsuit resulting good condition at the moment of inspection that people can do that are not experts, and being able to do in a reasonable amount of time. For instance, I noticed that electrical outlets are put on there. That would mean I have to flush every toilet when I go on these investment inspections. So that would mean I'd have to plug something into every outlet to add that. So I can see lights are on, I can feel the air conditioning, but if you haven't done these inspections, what I'm seeing on here is unsustainable and not doable. It's something that the district should be doing, and it's only part of the tool. For instance, you say, I want to know the number of toilets. Well, in factuality, if you look at this, you need actually every sink, okay, every toilet, every urinal, and there's a custodial guide for how much time that takes if those things exist. So you can't just pick one thing and try to edge towards it. You either do the whole thing and this becomes a totally different animal, or you back off from trying to make this a custodial tool and you just get the minimum information that you need to do an initial analysis and start putting more pressure on the LCAP people to update that form to actually make them provide an analysis by square footage and do all the calculations there. So I think OPSC needs to be very careful with this constituent input, that you're sticking to the master and intent of the legislation that was just passed and what you were asked to do, and not create something only partially or strangely that doesn't do it right. Because otherwise we're creating a tool that's bad in an attempt to do something more. Thank you.
Kimberly.
I hear you. The legislature was the one that wanted to use this tool and this method, in part because cleanliness was a huge component of the lawsuit, but wasn't included in the final outcome. So it was the legislature that directed this as the appropriate tool, and DGS and OPSC as the appropriate arbiters of figuring out a method. I think they are doing, the best they can with the tools we have. And I just want to say, I appreciate it. I think this is an early phase of looking at it. And again, this is a voluntary tool that is trying to get an assessment of where the cleaning standards are, in large part because there are dollars there that could be drawn down if we're able to establish that there's a need. The LCAP doesn't guarantee dollars. It is a local tool that also means that their local control funding formula flows a certain way. So there's no statewide floor. And I think that is the consideration the legislature had when they chose to use this tool, is to look at this as a statewide issue rather than a local one.
Cassie.
Hi, thank you. I'm Cassie Mancini, representing the California School Employees Association. I would just echo Kimberly's comments and say that we need these changes and we need further context, because our members' working conditions are our students' learning conditions, and it's worthwhile to invest the time to make sure that this form is completed right. And just to briefly go over some of our justification for the changes we proposed in E2 and E1, we think that, just as we kind of said before, that because their square footage provides additional perspective, and it's reasonable to assume that a larger facility needs a greater amount of effort to maintain that facility. It's also reasonable to assume that areas that serve younger students might need more care to them, areas with higher foot traffic, as opposed to areas of a school facility that are barely occupied. So that's why we think those area characteristics are incredibly important in addition to the square footage, and that's something that somebody should be able to view and not need additional expertise in order to describe. We also think that the completion of the FIT should be a more collaborative process, which is why we recommended allowing or having a custodial maintenance representative to accompany the inspector, especially because the folks that work on a school site might have additional perspective, might be able to point out additional things that an inspector who's coming to a site just a few times a year might not see immediately. And we also, again, as the comments have said before, think that there should be different boxes for full-time equivalent maintenance and custodial staff, and completely understand the statutory limits around the changes to an ABCD grading scale, but think that might be more understandable and a possible avenue for future legislative change. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions about our proposed changes.
Thank you, Cassie. Lance.
Not to sound argumentative, but I've heard a few times that this is referred to as an optional document. I've been in several school districts in Southern California, and every single district I've been in, this is the document. So I'd say there's definitely a larger proportion of districts using this as the default rather than creating their own. So any changes that are made to this document, I would strongly argue that these are going to be the by default what most school districts are going to be using.
And I think we saw that in 2005 when we had the IEI. Roughly between 47 and 53% of all school districts were using the IEI versus their own instruments. So I think you are correct. Obviously, that was 2005, and times have changed since then. But that's what we found back then, was there was quite a bit of usage of the form, even given the optionality of it. All right. OPSC, we focused on cleanliness for our first proposals out there because the statute was specific in using APPA as one of the references we should consider. So that was our first look at this. Certainly all the categories can be looked at. We don't need to focus on cleanliness necessarily, but that's where we started based on those books. Going forward, if there are other questions or comments or anything that wants people to add, we do plan to have another stakeholder meeting in January, tentatively, and if you subscribe to our email list, we'll send an email blast out for that. Tentatively, we got that going for January 20th at 4 to 6 p.m. also as well. We do welcome any feedback following this meeting. If you send it via email, you can send it to OPSC Communications at dgs.ca.gov. That link is on our website. You're welcome to send back feedback as a follow-up to this meeting as you've had time to just digest the agenda items some more. Send us your feedback. We're hoping to have feedback ideally by end of day December 12th. That'll give us time to incorporate any recommendations, comments, concerns, questions in time for that January meeting so that we can get that out to everybody. We go back to our office typically after these stakeholder meetings. We digest all the comments. We talk about what we think about them and what we can and can't do. And then we come up with an updated recommendation at the next stakeholder meeting of what our recommendations going forward be. Anything we choose to accept or not accept, we generally will explain why we've chosen to go that route. And then we seek everybody's feedback again based on those comments. That's kind of how these stakeholders work. But because we chose to spend some time on the focus on cleaning. How do people feel in general just about having a separate page for cleaning? The extra detail. It doesn't have to be these exact categories necessarily, but is there a general consensus of a like or dislike of having a page to break down cleaning in more detail? We'll start with Conrado.
Yes, good afternoon. So I'm a building engineer with LAUSD here in Southern California, and I've been doing this for 23 years. And I know we talked a little bit about HVAC. That's what I work at, out of HVAC. And we used to have a crew of about 70 building engineers pre-2008. Now we're down to about 16. Yet the equipment has increased, much more. Every space is now air conditioned, and we're not keeping up with the personnel needed to maintain this equipment. Along with cleanliness, I think now with this pandemic, we've been, my crew in my area, which is Central and South Los Angeles, we've changed over 1 million filters and changed, in 120 school sites to try to upgrade everything with the new filtration requirements that are needed. And I think we need to create some sort of a balance where personnel needs to be matching with the equipment that we have here and stuff, and not just if it's because if it's deteriorated, I mean it requires maintenance like everything else, right? And I think we just need to make sure that there's a space created there. Maybe I don't know how it would look like, but certain amount of HVAC equipment requires X amount of people to maintain it also and stuff, right? As opposed to just have because the department that how it exists now is there might be a crew of 20-25 people, but we do everything, not just maintenance, and we need to focus more on making sure that the equipment is suitable for it to work properly for the students and staff to have a learning environment here. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Frank.
Mike, did you say Frank?
Yes.
Okay. So I would echo Joanne Branch's comments. We really have to understand what's the purpose of the FIT. Is the FIT an inspection tool to maintain good repair, or is it going to be used as a tool potentially to lobby legislature to fund routine restricted maintenance at a higher percentage, or is it or at hold at 3%, or is it going to be something that's going to be used to obtain additional funding for custodial? So I think we need to put in perspective, like, what is the purpose of the FIT? Is it both? Is it a tool for parents to go ahead and determine the good repair standards of their particular district and standards of their upkeep of cleanliness and their maintenance systems? Or again, is it for lobbying for dollars? So really, what's the intended purpose of this tool? And I think we could probably, if we define that a little bit better, I think that we can bring this thing into perspective. Now, I've been doing this for many years too, and the FIT tool, in my perspective, has been a very cursory look. Not as deeply, Mike, as you mentioned earlier. It's a cursory look. Joanne mentioned as well. These are visual inspections. We're not going so deep into it that it becomes extremely cumbersome, and we don't have the talent to go into very great detail of that. So the original FIT tool, it's a good tool. It should be online. It should be digital. But I think we really need to understand its intended purpose and try to guide ourselves towards that. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak, Mike. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think from our perspective, just as the developers of the forum, it is for that purpose that's spelled out in statute. It's to report out the conditions of the facilities. What people and what school districts do with that report after that, it is up to them, right? We essentially just created the forum. Let's go to Andrea. Andrea, you there? Quiroga? Let me try to unmute you.
Yeah. Hi, sorry, I couldn't mute myself. My name is Andrea Quiroga, and I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you all that I have been a building and grounds worker for 6 years now with Los Angeles Unified School District. I currently work at Santee Education Complex. It is a 13.4 acre campus in South Los Angeles, and now more than ever, we need to make sure that our schools are thoroughly cleaned and disinfected throughout the day. Right now, we have been working a lot of overtime at Santee Education Complex. You know, we get there at 6 in the morning and I get off at 2:30 p.m. I have had to stay a couple of times 2 hours after work because we're so understaffed, and we have had to, you know, disinfect classrooms, help them, the night custodians with their assignments so they can catch up because they haven't had time to dust, they haven't had time to even mop some of these classrooms. You know, I and our colleagues right now are currently and repeatedly asked to do more with less, and these added tasks take time and energy. I mentioned I work at a 13.4 acre campus in South Los Angeles. So not only are we in charge of cleaning like the inside of the school, you know, making sure that it's maintained for our students, we also have to deal with what's going on outside of our school. Outside of our school, we had throughout the pandemic, I have been cleaning up after homeless people who live down the street from the school. They make holes in the fences in the PE fields, in the football fields. They've been coming in, they, you know, they leave graffiti over the weekends, they come into our pool, and they completely, you know, just like piled up glass I pick up in the mornings at 6 in the morning. Here I am, you know, scared sometimes because it's dark now, you know, it gets dark out there when it's early. And, you know, I do my best because I'm from South Los Angeles as well. You know, this is my community and I take a lot of pride in my job. You know, this job is very, very important. And with this pandemic, you know, in the new age of COVID-19, it just shows how important my work is and how much my work matters when it comes to our students' safety and health. And, you know, I just wanted to share that with you all today. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to speak out on what's going on in our schools. And, you know, thank you for sharing your information as well. You know, it's nice to do this and to talk about like the real issues of what's happening in our schools right now. You know, it's like very serious. And this is, you know, I really, really hope that, you know, we can count on you all to support us. And thank you for hearing me out. Yeah.
Thank you. Joanne.
Just one last quick comment while everyone is in the meeting, because I have high respect for my union folks. I'm a union daughter, and I just don't want anyone to think that my comments were in any way denigrating the fine work that our union personnel do for us. But this is a visual inspection by lay people. And so don't be surprised as we finalize this form if some of this stuff has to be modified. For instance, I, as a previous inspector, would not be able to look at something and tell you if it was disinfected, nor are we allowed to take self-proclaimed comments from the custodian or anyone else to say the item is disinfected. It has to be viewed as disinfected. I can't view disinfection, I can view cleanliness. So although I appreciate very much the impact of COVID, it is an LCAP issue, not a fit issue. And it is a huge issue, and it will remain with us. The COVID and this stuff is not going away. And I think it existed well before because folks need to be healthy in order to go to school. And it's an ADA thing. And it has always been a facilities and a custodial issue. It's just come to a head under COVID, thank goodness. And maybe we'll have a voice. The fit may not be. It will be a beginning voice, but it may not be the voice that you intend right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly.
I just wanted to say I think it makes sense to have it on a separate page because To many people's points, those that are assessing the traditional good repair have a different background and a different skill set and knowledge. I think ultimately we would like to continue to advocate for either training or a certain skill set, like those that have a custodial background doing the assessments, because we know there are limitations, and there's also different skill sets needed to do these visual inspections on a custodial basis versus on the tech and the repair basis. So I think having them be housed in the same place per the legislature's request, but having them broken out does allow for a little bit of variation. And I'm hoping, I think the feedback today was really helpful, that we can potentially make some changes and argue for training or argue for certain folks with a certain skill set to be the ones to do the assessment on that tab a little differently, because we are trying to assess different things. So I appreciate the thought behind that you guys did, and keeping it kind of housed separately.
Jeremy.
I also want to thank everyone for the questions asked this evening and for the hosts of the meeting. It was a pleasure listening in. I really wanted to speak more broadly. I represent, I'm the Director of Facilities Planning for Santa Ana Unified School District, with approximately 4.6 million square feet of building space in the heart of Orange County. And it was a pleasure listening to all the commenters and the specific comments about the forum tonight. But at a large level, what we see is the need for good data about our facilities. And the best decisions, I believe, are made when the best and cleanest data is available for those facilities. And so I would hope that in the process of modernizing the FIT, there's already been some comments about putting it online and what that looks like. I hope that it would be something cloud-based, that data would be exportable in an open format that the industry could utilize. I think there's a lot of opportunity here for industry partners, private sector partners to innovate based on working with districts and utilizing that data. A lot of the comments that revolved around expanding or adding or other aspects to the FIT. I could have envisioned an opportunity where the basic FIT form is there, but then districts may choose to export that data or use another module of software in tandem with that data, that want to do a better overall inventory of their facilities, not only conditions, but maybe other factors. And I've seen that done also very effectively in other states. I'm sure there's some models out there you've all looked at. So overall, just want to express my appreciation for all the commenters this evening and for the hosts of the meeting. But I would hope that there's a great effort made in making sure that the data becomes something that districts can expand on at their choosing, and potentially use that digital data set more effectively in a broader collection of cloud-based applications. Thank you very much.
Jeremy. Ian.
Thank you very much. I also just wanted to do a quick kind of, pull the camera back a little bit and be more general. Obviously, I want to thank OPSC for engaging in this task. I think we're seeing it's a significant undertaking. So appreciate that. And of course, with Coalition for Adequate School Housing, Cash Maintenance Network, we offer our resources and our expertise and so on. A couple of comments. One, I think the history that you did, Michael, was an important one. It goes to the purpose, the intent, and so on. Not making a comment about those specifics, just this is an important one. This is the Williams lawsuit legacy. It's an important in our world, in our school facilities folks, M&O folks have been engaged in it for quite a while. So you see the ownership that they've taken in it. With regard to your initial OPSC's initial proposals, I'll just say I think that's an excellent place to start. With the cleanliness piece, with the square footage, you know that we have a group discussing this along, and that's one of the first things a lot of folks in our group talked about, and I think it came up in the discussion and in the staffing issue. We know that's a significant piece here. I know for the school facilities folks, the details matter on that one. You can see them. Okay, there's a difference between maintenance and custodial, and those are things that it's good we have some time and some meetings to work through going forward. So happy to participate in that. Kind of my wrap up is I'm going to take an attempt at I think there's universal agreement that some specificity and recognition of staff time and all of those pieces are necessary to highlight what M&O departments are doing with these to keep to use Williams clean, safe, and functional, right? To do that. And I think that we really do, all of us have a common motivation for this. I think we're seeing different sides of it. So with SEIU, I would like to engage with you on that, because I hear you, frankly, on the need for advocacy for funding to just cut it all the way down for these things. That's not OPSC's job. I understand that. They're trying to perfect a document. So in some ways, we're doing two things here at once. Someone asked a really good question. Is this about, narrowly the fit, or is this about funding? Well, I think OPSC's effort is more narrowly the fit, and there's a lot of support for that, but it is also connected to other efforts, I think, of funding. And so Cash is wanting to engage in that as well. But I would end with, I represent the practitioners on this. And of course, they know very well the labor impacts of COVID and so on. We talk about it on a daily basis, and that's not an exaggeration. But of course, their job in management is to make sure that they can do their jobs, and things don't change in a way that we have significant unintended consequences. So that's why I'll say, and on a positive note, that's why I think it's good that we're having this discussion. I think the right folks are at the table here to do this, because we know that M&O departments have been the last funded, right, and the first cut and the last restored. I think we all understand that. As long as we don't make this a document something that it just cannot be, and that we can coordinate these more formal acts with other lobbying or advocacy purposes in favor of funding. I heard Gema Estrella refer to that, and I heard Kimberly refer to that as well. And so it's not an easy thing, right, to square the circle here, but I think in a complex world, it's both of these things. But again, my job is to make sure that practitioners are represented going through this. I think they're well represented, and will continue to do that and be a resource for OPSC and for other partners in the coalition. So thank you.
Thank you, Ian. One more, Edward.
Hello, Eddie. This is Eddie Sanchez, Los Angeles Unified School District. If this is the direction we're going, I like the form in a separate sheet. I also think that training would be needed for the inspectors, since cleaning is subjective. I also heard both points from SEIU and I believe Joanne and Lance. It might pose a problem. I'm an advocate of operations. I'm over operations for LA Unified School District, and I see where our staffing levels are low. And if these inspections come in as good or fair, but there is something needed to identify the need. I don't know if this is the right tool for it, but it's definitely a great start. It's a good start to start documenting the conditions of the schools based on square footage. And I will go more so not FTEs, but more of allotted hours per school, which gives it a better idea of how many hours are allocated to that school for custodial. I know this is one of many more meetings to come, but I think I heard a lot of great points from everyone, and I'm glad to be part of this group. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more comments, I'm going to screen share the contact information for OPSC if you want to send feedback after this meeting. Lisa, closing remarks?
Yeah, so thanks everybody. I know this is, we did good, it's 90 minutes so far. But no, it's a great opportunity to kind of air things out and get everyone's opinion. And I think we value everyone's opinion. So what I would highly encourage, like Michael shared earlier, is I know it's a lot of comments we've had today was verbal, and perhaps we will like to see written comments as well. So then that way, none of it get lost as far as, what your opinions are, or share some ideas. I think it's really important to get everyone's feedback. So thank you today for the opportunity. I think it went well, and good to hear everyone's perspective. And we'll see you soon on January 20th. Is that correct, Michael? Correct. Between 4 and 6. Yeah. So again, we look forward to more dialogue in this area and more collaboration. So thank you.